They said no one went near that old barn after sunset. The wood was rotting, the boards split and curling like tired fingers. The air around it always smelled of dust and fear. At night, people swore they heard crying coming from inside. Not human, but not quite animal either. Most folks only whispered about it, crossed themselves, and stayed away. But one night, a cowboy passing through heard that sound, soft and broken. He stopped his horse, listened again, and something in that cry cut straight through his chest. The barn stood at the edge of the valley, where green grass slowly turned to dust. Wind moved through that place differently, carrying whispers instead of songs. The paint on the barn had long been stripped away by sun and rain. The pause in the cedar post 22. Every nail looked tired, every beam heavy with age. The roof sagged as if it carried the weight of every secret the town refused to speak aloud. During the day, crows perched on its rafters watching in silence. But when night came, even the crows flew somewhere else. No one remembered who built the barn. Or maybe they did, but no one wanted to say. People who passed by after dark told the same stories. They spoke of hooves striking wood deep inside, slow and steady, then stopping all at once. Some claimed they saw a flicker of light, like a lantern moving in the darkness. But whenever someone worked up the courage to look, there was nothing inside except old hay, damp wood, and a sharp metallic smell that made the stomach turn. Parents warned their children never to go near it. They said the barn was cursed, that something wicked had been locked inside long ago. One story said a horse went mad and trampled its owner. Another claimed it was not madness at all, but punishment, a soul that could not rest. Every version ended the same way. No one goes near that barn after dark. By day, it looked harmless enough, just another old ruin forgotten by time. But when the sun dipped behind the hills, the last light caught the crooked roof and made it look alive. Shadows shifted inside like slow breathing. Silence pressed in thick and heavy. The road that passed by was always empty at night. Riders took the long way around. Wagons turned back. And when the wind blew through the valley, it carried a sound that made even the bravest stop and listen. A sound that did not belong to any living thing. The rain came down hard that night, turning the dirt road into mud. Lightning split the sky, again and again, lighting the town for a heartbeat before darkness swallowed it whole. A lone cowboy rode slowly through the storm. His hat was pulled low, his coat soaked through. The steady rhythm of his horse's hooves was almost lost beneath the thunder. He had been riding since dawn, heading nowhere in particular, just away from memories he did not want to carry anymore. When the wind shifted, he heard it. At first, it sounded like the storm twisting a whisper the wrong way. He slowed his horse and listened. The sound came again, high, broken, and desperate. The cry of a horse, not the cry of pain or wild fear. This sound came from loneliness. His horse snorted and stepped back, ears pinned tight. The cowboy rubbed her neck and spoke softly, though his own voice shook. He turned toward the sound, and there it was. The old barn at the edge of town, its roof bowed low. One door hung crooked from its hinges. Each flash of lightning made it seem closer, like it was breathing in the dark. Another cry rose from inside, long and hollow, the kind of sound that could stop a man's heart. The cowboy felt cold settle in his stomach. He had heard horses cry before, in storms and in pain. Never like this. This sound was alive and haunted at the same time. He sat there as rain poured from his hat brim. Common sense told him to keep riding, to let it remain just another story people told at night. But the cry came again, softer now, weaker, like a plea. He tightened the reins and stared at the barn. "Easy, girl," he whispered to his horse. "We'll just take a look." And with that, he turned toward the sound that would change his life forever. The storm passed by morning, leaving the town quiet and wet. Puddles reflected the pale sky. The cowboy tied his horse near the saloon and began asking about the barn. At the sound of his question, people shifted uneasily. Eyes darted toward the hills, lips pressed tight. An old man sitting on a porch tipped his hat and shook his head. He told the cowboy that the barn had a story and that some doors were better left closed. His voice carried years of warning. The cowboy said he heard a horse crying there the night before. The old man spat into the dirt and said that horse was not right, that nothing good came from that place. Others joined in, each adding their own fearful details. They spoke of screams heard when no one was around, of doors slamming shut from the inside, of shadows moving when the barn stood empty. Some said anyone who went near it at night came back changed. The cowboy listened carefully. Beneath the fear, he heard something else. Grief, regret, a story left unfinished. He thanked them and walked away, knowing he would not be leaving town without answers. That night, the sky was darker than before. The cowboy sat by a small fire on the edge of town. The flames did little to chase the chill from his bones. The cry of the horse echoed in his mind. He had passed that barn before, seen it in moonlight, and turned away. Now the guilt sat heavy in his chest. He stood, lifted a lantern, and began walking toward the valley. Each step felt heavier than the last. The wind moaned through the trees and tugged at his coat. The barn loomed ahead, silent and watching. He stopped and listened. The wind carried a faint sound this time, a hesitant whinny, fragile and pleading. That was enough. He stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked beneath his boots. The door hung crooked, daring him to enter. He took a breath and pushed it open. The smell hit him first. Old hay, damp wood, and something sharp and metallic. Dust floated in the lantern light. The barn felt larger inside than it should have been. Shadows stretched long and deep. From the far corner something moved. He raised the lantern and froze. A horse stood there, so thin its ribs showed clearly. Its legs trembled. Its eyes were wide and dark, filled with fear and sorrow. Chains hung from the beams above. Some lay broken on the floor. Others still clung to the horse's limbs. This was no monster. This was a soul that had been forgotten. The horse flinched at his approach but did not run. There was nowhere to go. The cowboy lowered the lantern and spoke softly. The horse watched him closely, torn between fear and hope. He saw the scars left by chains, years of confinement written across its body, yet in its eyes there was still a spark, small but alive. The cowboy knelt slowly. His chest tightened as he imagined the night spent alone in darkness. He reached out carefully. The horse did not bolt. For the first time in years, hope flickered in the shadows of that barn. And the cowboy knew this was only the beginning. The lantern trembled in the cowboy's hand as he knelt there, the light rising and falling with his breath. The horse watched him closely, every muscle tight, every breath shallow. Chains lay scattered on the floor like dead snakes, some still wrapped around her legs, others snapped and rusted from age. The barn groaned softly as the wind pushed against its walls, as if it remembered every night she had cried out and no one came. The cowboy moved slowly, careful not to frighten her. He spoke in a low voice, steady and calm, the way a man speaks when he does not want to scare his own heart. He told her she was not alone anymore. He told her he was sorry it had taken so long. The words were simple, but they carried weight. The horse's ears twitched forward, then back again, unsure what to believe. He set the lantern down and reached for the nearest chain. The metal was cold and rough beneath his fingers. He pulled out his knife and began cutting through the weakest links. Each snap echoed through the barn like a gunshot. The horse flinched at first, then slowly realized the sound meant something was changing. When the last chain fell away, she stood frozen, as if afraid freedom might vanish if she moved too quickly. "You're all right," he whispered. "No one's going to lock you away again." She took one careful step forward, then another. Her legs shook, but she did not fall. When she lowered her head and pressed it against his chest, the cowboy felt his throat tighten. He wrapped an arm around her neck, gentle and sure. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The storm outside faded into memory. Inside that barn, there was only quiet breathing and the soft creak of old wood. When he finally stood, he noticed something carved into one of the stall boards. The letters were worn but still clear, Luna. He traced the name with his finger, feeling a chill run through him. On the floor nearby, half buried in dust, he found a small, cracked frame. Inside was a faded photograph. A young girl smiled brightly, her arms wrapped around a strong chestnut horse. The same horse now standing before him, thinner and broken, but unmistakable. The truth settled slowly in his chest. The stories the town had told were wrong, twisted by fear and grief. This horse had not been a monster. She had been loved once, deeply. He imagined a fire, the kind that spreads fast and leaves nothing but ash. He saw a girl trying to save what mattered most. He saw loss turn into anger, and anger turn into blame. Somewhere along the way, Luna had been locked away, punished for surviving. The cowboy swallowed hard. He knew that kind of pain. He had lost a horse once, years ago, to a storm that came too fast. He remembered calling her name into the wind, knowing even then it was too late. The guilt had followed him across miles of open land. Now he saw the same pain reflected in Luna's eyes. He led her slowly out of the barn just as the first light of morning touched the valley. The air smelled clean after the storm. Luna hesitated at the doorway, blinking as sunlight brushed her face. She stepped forward, hooves touching open ground for the first time in years. By the time the sun rose higher, people began to gather. They stood at a distance, whispering, pointing. The horse they had feared walked calmly beside the cowboy, her head low but steady. There was no madness in her movement, no rage, only quiet strength. Some covered their mouths, others looked away, shame flickering in their eyes. No one spoke as the cowboy mounted carefully. Luna shifted beneath him, uncertain but calm. Together they rode past the barn and into the open field beyond town. The days that followed were not easy. Luna was weak. Her body had survived, but her trust had been stretched thin. The cowboy camped near the valley, giving her space and time. He brushed her coat, fed her slowly, spoke to her often. Some nights she woke suddenly, trembling at shadows that no longer held her. He stayed close, always patient, always calm. People came quietly to watch from a distance. Children who had once been warned away now stared with wide eyes. The barn stood empty behind them, silent for the first time anyone could remember. No cries came from it anymore. As Luna grew stronger, the bond between them deepened. She followed him willingly. She trusted his voice, and the cowboy felt something inside him begin to heal as well. The guilt he had carried for years loosened its grip. But not everyone was ready to let the past rest. One evening, as the sun dipped low, an older man rode into the valley. His face was hard, lined by years of regret he never spoke aloud. He stopped when he saw Luna. His jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. "That horse should have stayed locked away," the man said. The cowboy turned to face him, calm but firm. "She's done nothing wrong." The man shook his head. "You don't know what she cost this town." The air between them grew heavy. Luna shifted, sensing tension. The cowboy placed a hand on her neck, steadying her. "I know what fear costs," the cowboy said quietly. "And I know what blame does when grief has nowhere to go." The man looked away, pain flickering across his face before anger took its place. "Some things can't be undone," he muttered. "Maybe not," the cowboy replied, "but some things can be set right." The man said nothing more. He turned his horse and rode away, leaving dust and silence behind him. But the cowboy knew the past was not finished with them yet. That night, the wind picked up again. The barn creaked softly in the distance. Luna stood alert, ears forward, listening. The cowboy felt it too, a sense that peace, once found, could still be challenged. He tightened the blanket around Luna's shoulders and looked toward the dark shape of the barn. Whatever shadows remained there, he knew one thing for certain. He would not turn away again. And neither would she. The wind rose before dawn, cold and restless, sweeping through the valley like it was searching for something it had lost. Luna stood near the edge of the camp, her ears flicking toward the old barn in the distance. The cowboy watched her closely. He had learned her quiet signs now, the way her muscles tightened, the way her breath changed. She was listening to something more than the wind. He felt it too, a sense that the past was stirring, unwilling to stay buried. By mid-morning, the town was awake with uneasy movement. Word had spread that the horse was gone from the barn for good. Some people felt relief. Others felt anger. Fear had lived with them for so long that they did not know who they were without it. And fear, when left unchecked, often looked for someone to blame. The same older man returned before noon, this time with others behind him. Ranchers, townsmen, faces lined with doubt and resentment. They stopped a short distance away, eyes fixed on Luna. She stood tall beside the cowboy, her coat cleaner now, her body stronger, though the scar still told her story. "You can't just take her," one man said. "That horse belongs to this town." The cowboy stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. He said the town had taken enough from her already. Years of darkness, years of silence. He said fear had written lies where truth should have been. Another man shook his head. He said people had died. That loss had to mean something. That pain needed a place to land. The cowboy listened. He did not interrupt. When they finished, he spoke slowly. He told them about the photograph, about the name carved into the wood, about chains that had rusted into flesh. He told them the barn had not been cursed. It had been a prison built from grief. The crowd grew quiet. The older man's hands trembled at his sides. His eyes dropped to the ground. When he finally spoke, his voice broke. He said the girl in the photograph had been his daughter. He said the fire had taken everything from him. And when he found the horse alive, he had not known what to do with his pain. So he locked it away and called it justice. Silence stretched across the field. Luna stepped forward then, slow and careful. She stopped just short of the man. He flinched at first, then looked up. Their eyes met. There was no anger in hers, only memory, only recognition. The man's shoulders sagged. Years of weight seemed to fall from him all at once. He whispered her name like a confession. Luna lowered her head slightly, a quiet gesture that needed no words. Something shifted in the air. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. The cowboy spoke again. He said the past could not be undone, but it did not have to keep hurting everyone forever. He said Luna deserved a life beyond fear, and maybe the town did too. No one argued after that. That evening, the barn burned. Not in anger, not in blame. The town gathered as the sun dipped low, and the flames rose, slowly, carefully set. The wood crackled as years of silence turned to smoke. The roof collapsed inward, sparks lifting into the darkening sky. Luna stood beside the cowboy watching. She did not panic. She did not cry. She stood steady, as if she understood that this was an ending she needed. When the last beam fell, the valley grew quiet. The barn that had held so much sorrow was gone. In its place, only ash and open ground remained. The cowboy stayed one more night. At dawn, he saddled Luna. The town gathered again, but this time there was no fear in their eyes. Some tipped their hats, others simply watched, thoughtful and still. The older man stepped forward last. He did not speak. He only placed a small, worn horseshoe into the cowboy's hand. It was the one found in the barn, a piece of the past, now given freely. The cowboy nodded. He mounted slowly. Luna moved beneath him with confidence, her steps sure and calm. Together they rode toward the open plains, the sun rising at their backs. They traveled far from the valley, across rolling grasslands, through quiet towns that asked no questions. Luna grew strong again. Her coat shone. Her eyes softened. At night she slept without trembling. The cries that once echoed through darkness were gone. The cowboy found peace he had not known he was missing. The guilt that once chased him across miles finally loosened its grip. He learned that healing did not come from running, but from staying when it mattered most. Years later, people still spoke of the barn that once stood at the edge of the valley. But the story changed. It was no longer about fear. It was about a horse who survived. About a man who listened. About a town that learned too late, but not too late to change. And somewhere out on the open land, A cowboy and a horse rode free. Two souls once broken, now whole, bound not by chains or sorrow, but by trust. The wind carried no cries anymore, only the sound of hooves moving forward, steady and strong, into a future finally unafraid.